It's time again, folks, for the month-end edition of the Frontrunner Football Podcast. It's the one we record on Mondays, making it the last of June. And you'll hear us again in July, by which time there'll be some discussions as to what's happening with local football by then, because we're expecting something to happen on Tuesday as far as the powers that be are concerned, meeting and forging a way forward. But to forge a way forward tonight, I have alongside me Jonty, Velile, Mnyandu, and Mazola, Molefe to discuss all that's in the news cycle. And we start with some insights from a chat that the members of SAFJA had with Dr. Thulani Ngwenya in terms of what was happening or what are the plans around the health implications of what's happening moving forward with local football. I can imagine, Stavej, that it was quite an illuminating discussion as far as getting some insights. How did that one go? What did you guys learn?
Yeah, look, Kamza, the issue of Dr. Ngwenya coming to update us, I think it was just after the national government, through the National Command Council and the Department of Sport and Arts and Culture, that they had given football the go-ahead to continue with, in fact, to resume their programs, training and also playing. Also, after they had looked at what they had presented. Mm-hmm. But Dr. Ngwenya, one of the things that he was also talking about was that football clubs, it will not just be an easy situation of going straight to training or to playing, the steps that have to be followed. Mm. And one of those was the issues of testing. Mm-hmm. We've seen a number of clubs last week coming out with their results in terms of the tests. And we've seen some clubs coming out with the names of those who tested positive, some teams not doing that. And it's sort of another thing that Dr. Ngwenya also explained, that there's this confidentiality mm-hmm. Between doctor and the patient. And here also he was in support of those who are not divulging the names of players who have tested positive. But what is also important is that now, for instance, I heard that Kaizer Chiefs who were tested last week, mm-hmm. they are testing again this week, sure. in anticipation of tomorrow's meeting, which you are talking about, the POG meeting, which will be ratifying the recommendations of the task team and also the executive committee to go back to training and eventually playing, because the anticipation is that they'll train for 3 weeks, and then after 3 weeks they'll resume playing at a biologically safe environment, mm-hmm. Possibly in Gauteng or in KZN. That decision, I think it will come out tomorrow. So these are some of the things that Dr. Ngwenya was also sharing with us. But also he was also sharing why the process took longer. Unexpected as well. And he was also emphasizing on the importance of lives being more important than football at first. So making sure that they are trying to make sure that whatever happens, whatever processes they're following, the lives of the players will be safe. But also, you will recall that football was one of the first sporting codes to be allowed to come back. Mm-hmm. Especially non-contact. And this is one of the things he had said to me when I invited him to the meeting, to say, the way they've worked on this, I think, 60-page document, mm-hmm. As the SAFA Joint Liaison Committee with the PSL, because he's not alone. He's working with almost all the doctors, right, who are coming from the PSL teams, right, including his counterpart at the PSL, Dr. Lavasan Pillay. Mm-hmm. So I think there's about close to 20, if not more of them, including some coming from SASCOC as well. Okay. Yes. So he was saying one of the reasons it was easier for government to allow football to come back, and because he was also saying the document they've been working on is so tight to an extent that if everything is implemented to the team, mm-hmm. there's a very slight chance that there could be a positive case once football gets away. Okay. You know, Yeah, he said, I think Jonty will correct me. He said, I think maybe only 1% chance that there could be this difficulty. But he was also saying the way they've put together that document, it could fit. They could have played football even if it was level 4. They could play in football in level 3. So it didn't have to wait until level 1, because at first he was clear that there had been, when they started with this process, there were 2 different sides.
Right.
SAFA felt that they could only play at level 1, and PSL felt differently about it. But now, having started working together on this, things are different. And before I also, maybe Jonty will share some of the things here that I'm forgetting. One of the points were, because we're also not sure about the issues of the deadline. And one deadline that I know of is tomorrow, that PSL and SAFA have to inform FIFA. Because as much as government still has the final say on the return to playing, but they still have to communicate with FIFA.
Right.
And so that's the only deadline. But otherwise, there is no deadline.
Right.
In terms of saying, FIFA saying you should finish your program by this time.
Okay.
But it only becomes the National Association and also the league, which then set their own timelines. And I think that's why also the chairman of the league, he said it to Sunday Times yesterday, that they've set themselves time that they want to finish the program by the 31st of August.
Okay. And Jonty, I mean, did you get a sense of the kind of profile that a suitable venue would have to have? Because, I mean, you know, the kind of names that are being mentioned seem to be in the same breath as like hotspots. So how did he give any insight as to what kind of boxes the suggested venues would have to tick for them to be viable?
I mean, the main things he said, Kamza, were that obviously the training, there have to be enough training venues for the teams, there have to be enough hotels for the teams to stay in, and there have to be enough, obviously, stadiums for the matches to be played in.
Yeah. But that's the logistics thing. So what's the health implications in terms of the areas that they do it in? Because obviously Joburg, Cape Town, KZN.
There's these so-called, zones that are not as high risk as others, which
in the zones, in the hotspots.
To the Limpopo and to the Northwest, which are 2 venues that we've talked about. Gauteng is more of a risk, so perhaps that's not going to happen here. But also, it's a thing of, we do have the venues here, so it's a tricky balancing act between that. And I think the idea that Mr. Ngwenya or Dr. Ngwenya posted was that if you can create an environment that's contained, it doesn't 100% matter if it's a hotspot or not.
Okay.
It's 99% chance that the disease will not spread, or the virus will not spread in that contained environment, as long as you can keep it contained. Okay. Whether it can be as strictly implemented here is another matter, but you have to be almost extremely strict about it, as they were perhaps in Germany when you had that coach who went to buy a toothbrush and got banned from attending his team's matches for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
because he left effectively the bubble that they'd created. So they said, sorry, you went to buy a toothbrush down the road. You can't come. You can't be the head coach at your team's Bundesliga 2 matches for the next couple of weeks. Sorry for you. Yeah. So they have to be that strict about it. But if they are, there's a real chance. There's a way they can. And they did say that FIFA have said it's one of the best ones they've received, one of the best reports they've received on how you're going to deal with it. So even though, as Velile mentioned, clubs have started testing positive and of announcing those positive tests, I think they're going to go forward. He did sort of mention that having only 1 or 2 cases is actually a good thing, because it means it's not spread through the entire squad and it's not a real problem. I mean, they can isolate the people who have the virus, and then they can work with the rest of the squad, and then they can rejoin in 2 weeks once they've been isolated and followed the procedure. So I think that there's definitely a determination to get it up and running, and the only way you're going to see an intervention is if we really see horrific spike in cases in the next sort of month or two.
Yeah,
that could pose a problem simply in terms of the government changing the level of lockdown. But for now, I think we're going ahead, and I think the general consensus is that by August we'll have a date, or by August there'll be some PSL action, and the training to start ASAP. Hopefully, once the PSL have their BOG meeting tomorrow, they'll give the go ahead to clubs to start their training.
Okay, cool. I mean, Mazola, this also kind of all hinges on the goodwill and the professionalism that you hope has been observed by the players in all this quarantine. What happens? I feel like there might be a bit of a surprise around the corner as to when the testing gets thorough and, regular, that things might start popping up, especially because we've been hearing rumors about some teams training, even though they're not supposed to. Players, sometimes we know that they live together, have other players over. So there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts, and one of them being the big consideration that players have actually played their part in containing things.
Yeah, look, I think the bigger issue for me, excuse me, if I can put it like that, is if the PSL tomorrow in that BOG meeting do not sort of maybe meet the clubs halfway in terms of, financing the testing of players, that's going to be an issue, because already there's been club officials and club chairmen. I mean, Farouk Kadodia last week, revealed that it costs, obviously at 850 per head, if you're testing players and staff members, we're talking the numbers between 40 and 50. And if you do the maths, that's well over 40,000. Just testing your staff members. If you're having to do this every week or every other week or however many times the task team report has said you have to test players to keep the bubble sort of safe for you to continue playing, and obviously this is also in the long term, in the long run as well, because if we don't have a vaccine for the next year or 2 years, then this means clubs must be testing regularly to ensure safety and observing the health protocol. So, my point is, if the PSL does not come to the party and say to clubs, look, we will fund the testing process to some degree, or we'll meet you halfway, then I foresee problems. Clubs will stop testing because they simply cannot afford it. Sure. I mean, if you're spending 40,000 a week or every other week, you can just do the maths. I mean, that's essentially that is where your grant will be going in terms of paying instead of paying salaries and being able to fill gaps here and there in terms of what the clubs need to do. I know it might sound like a bit of an exaggeration saying that's where the grant will go, but essentially that's what the clubs will claim, because I've seen comments or heard comments now from at least 2 club chairmen in the top division and in the lower division, and then also other club officials that have not been named, saying that it's just too expensive and they are hoping the PSL can chip in. So that for me is the biggest issue, and it would be interesting to see how the PSL can tackle that one.
I mean, Stavej, on that point, I guess you could argue that, like, right now they're not traveling, all the expenses that they would have had in a regular season, I guess that money can be redirected towards the testing. But then on that point of it being one of the best plans that FIFA has seen, that sounds like, best usually means expensive. Or how have they mitigated the costs of having the best plan against what Mazola says, grants and money that some of the teams don't have?
Yeah, which is also, as much as I understand where some of those clubs are coming from, because one of the things we must also take into consideration is that these are business people we're talking about, and some of their businesses have not been in operation during the better part of this lockdown, and also most of them, they always have to top up the grants. The grant on its own, I mean, if you talk about the Great Africa Championship, a team is getting a grant of R500,000, you know, but the salaries, they are way above that, you know, it's way more than that amount. But look, when you take into consideration that they've not been staging games, and to stage a game, especially in the PSL, could be anything between 300,000 rands to 1.5 million rand a game, depending on the magnitude of that match.
Sure.
There's no traveling, there's no accommodation for some of these teams. And also in the documents that I've seen, which have been part of the submission, the PSL has taken the lead to take care, especially once they go inside the bubble, you know. So if our part of the teams, because the teams, I think they should also be grateful that
and embrace
it, you know, has come up with this plan of going ahead. But sometimes I feel that in our country, you know, people don't know how to take responsibility, you know, because look, just test.
Yes. And
then when you start training and then you get inside there, then the PSL is footing everything, you know. But as I've said, that this other area comes in as well. This is when you start to see that some of these clubs, the grant on its own has not been enough. They always have to top up. So then it chows them. That's why, but this is an issue that Mazola is going to address. That's why some clubs are not holding on to some players now, because
that was not needs to be redirected. Yeah. Have to redirect funds.
You know, because also if you keep him now, there's also something that says signing on fee has to kick in as well.
Sure.
So where are you going to find that 1 million rand?
For sure. And also if he tests positive, now you have someone that you're paying money to who you can't even use because they're in quarantine for 2 weeks. So I guess, you know, it is an opportunity to cut your losses as a club.
Because this is another challenge, because, you know, some of these players are not disciplined. I'm told that ever since alcohol came back, you know, in the shop, players are having mini parties. You know,
that kind of makes sense to me. I've heard similar things. I'll be honest. I've heard similar to that, and it's that's why I asked that. You know, the onus will be on the players to come back ready and raring, but it seems some of them might be compromised, if not immunocompromised, when they go back to their clubs. So this is the space that we're all watching to see what happens with that bated breath. Okay, gents, let's move, because I guess the end of the month is around the corner. And Mazola, you've touched on Maritzburg United, and there's some implications there. Obviously, they've decided not to hold on to Brocky. He's a free agent. But now Siyanda Xulu is another player coming into the whole discussion as to him being allowed to move on. Is that a economics decision at the end of the day?
I think so. Look, Siyanda's had an amazing 3 years at Maritzburg United. I don't think anyone can doubt that. You look at the stats, he's been a key figure of that team, captained them as well. You know, became a candidate for Defender of the Season under Fadlu Davids when they went all the way in the Nedbank Cup, only to lose to Free State Stars in the final. And I think they also finished, fourth on the table. And even, obviously, last season they struggled and almost got relegated, but Eric sort of saved their bacon there, and so they've started pretty well so far this season. And they're you know, hoping when football resumes, they consolidate their top 8, top 6 position as well. So, you know, from that point of view, I think with Brokey, a lot of people would look at that and say, look, Brokey was struggling as it was. He wasn't getting enough game time.
Yeah.
He was, you know, playing second fiddle behind Thabiso Kutumela, Julius Musiamedi, and even the young kid Hlongwane. You know, Hlongwane was even playing ahead of Jeremy Brokey. And as we know, Brokey probably came at a heavy sort of
investment
salary package, which probably Mamelodi Sundowns are also contributing to that. So for me, if I look at it, I think it's purely a financial decision that they couldn't keep Siyanda, because how can you let go of such an integral part of the team when you need him in these last few remaining games? Why can't you extend his contract by just 2 months and see it through? You know, and I have a feeling also that it was because they could no longer afford him. It's sad for Siyanda, because this now means Siyanda is gonna possibly go another 2 months, one without a club, two without a salary as well. And that means he's lost a lot of money. I mean, this is a player who's still only 28 years old. He's got ambitions to return to Europe, but with the COVID-19, chances are he might have to settle for a club locally. And also, I must say, I'm shocked that there's, some of the big teams have not come in for Siyanda on a pre-contract, unless maybe there are some issues that we are not privy to. But a player of Siyanda's quality, 28 years old, played at the highest level here in SA, played in Europe, was highly rated by Barcelona, highly rated by Arsenal, and he's essentially out of a job. It is a bit of a shocker to me. Yeah.
No, I can imagine. I mean,
I'm not sure either. But do we really think he has not been tied down yet?
Somewhere else.
Yeah. No.
Look, it might very well be, but
yes. But the only thing is that he's not going to be registered by that new team now.
Yeah.
But something tells me that he's got a new address already.
Huh.
And as far as I know, I don't know anything about a new address. But maybe Velile doing something that we don't. He must disclose. He must tell us.
Maybe he does. Savage, do you know anything?
He's returning to the province of Gauteng.
Okay, there we go. That's a nice tidbit of information there. Okay, cool. I mean, Jonty, you know what? It seems to be a buyer's market because, Xulu is about to be without a job. Savage reckons he's already got a job, but now you're hearing the likes of Ofori and Daruk also kind of possibly being, allowed to move on if the right offer comes around. But then again, it just goes to that thing of like reestablishing dominance amongst maybe 2-3 teams now going into the new season, because there's not that many people who can buy.
Yeah, you're definitely seeing that now. I mean, who could have? Ofori has been linked with Pirates more times than I can remember. Deroik is also another one who's in the public eye,
right?
Who will be a target for many clubs if he's at the right price, because he's one of the best young defenders in the country, if not the best. He's had a fantastic season with Maritzburg, and I think it's like this situation that a lot of clubs find themselves in. The finances are tight. COVID-19 has hammered clubs financially, and if they can get good money for their best players, then that's what they'll take the money now. They'll take the money and they'll be able to sustain their own club going forward. With obviously it's still slightly unclear when everything's going to start again, and with all these extra costs, as Velile mentioned, with the COVID testing and all that kind of thing. I think that clubs are just saying, the grant's not enough. We need to make some money. And then what you have is clubs that can afford to buy players will snap up the best players. Sundown certainly have the money. Pirates and Chiefs are two clubs that have also been mentioned as in the mix. That's providing Chiefs obviously can buy players at all if they win their case with the CAS, Court of Arbitration for Sport. So that's all still in the pipeline. But yeah, it's a situation. It's the same thing as why Modiba suddenly, I think, is on sale again to Sundowns.
Yeah,
SuperSport want to sell him, but if they're going to get a couple of million rand or however much it is for him, they're going to take it because they need the money. So that's the situation we definitely find ourselves in at the moment with these with more and more of the top players probably ending up with Pirates, Chiefs, or Sundowns again. With the proviso that Chiefs can buy anyone.
Yeah, and to all of you, I mean, what does that mean for the future of South African football? I mean, you look at clubs that are maybe were trying to get in and disrupt the stranglehold that the top 3 might have on the league. I don't see that loosening now, that stronghold, as far as those teams are concerned. It seems like there's going to be many years of dominance, but concentrated amongst only a few teams, David.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was reading this article yesterday on the Sunday Times, and some marketers from the game, Aaron Madlala and also Skuli Kumende, they were talking about the model, the model of Mamelodi Sundowns. If Mutsipe was to wake up tomorrow and say he's leaving football, or something happens, then he leaves Sundowns, that would be the end of Sundowns.
For sure.
Because the model that they're using is based on Mutsipe's wealthiness,
Yeah.
Mutsupe's wealth. It's not
a business wealth.
It's not a football business model. Exactly. They're based on the money that Mutsupe. So if you look at what has happened to Bidvest Veds as well, you have this club that has been spending, or that came up with budgets of 70 million, but the revenue that's coming in is not matching that. So at some stage, that was, so that is the situation. And also, you look at Kaizer Chiefs today announcing the players. Obviously, the transfer ban has got a bearing on
means a lot of renewals.
Exactly. But now, combined, those players have only played 3 matches the whole season. In fact, the 3 matches is only one.
That was not Ernst's decision. That was clearly not Ernst, the coach's decision.
Yeah, if he will be there in any case.
Oh. The Chengase decision is bizarre. You can sort of understand them giving a young goalkeeper a year extension.
No, but even him, if you look at Brelon Peterson.
Jonty, all three of them, that's a management decision. That is not the coach's decision. No chance.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah.
But does that mean that the management are resigned to losing this case if they're just signing players that they don't need?
But look, it's not easy to win that case in any case, because as things stand now, the case is against them.
Right.
And they are appealing. And most of the time, clubs who appeal that kind of a decision, they don't win those type of cases.
Right.
So you have to understand where they come from. Brelon Peterson has only sat on the bench at Chiefs 2 or 3 times in the past 3 years.
Yeah.
Only time sitting on the bench.
Right.
I'm not even talking about playing.
Right.
And Kamza has not played a single official game this year. Zulu was one of the players who came very close to being released in January. Right. And he played only 3 minutes,
Yeah.
So you can see. But also, now going back to your original point, look, in terms of the gap between the big teams and the teams who are in the middle, and some of the so-called smaller teams, I think the gap for the next 2 years at least is going to widen.
That's going to be interesting to watch unfold, because obviously, if we speak about the implications of this case on Kaizer Chiefs, Mazola, they might have a tough time catching up to Pirates and a Sundowns, who are now just kind of, acquiring all the best talent that's on offer. And even youngsters at that, like we've discussed on the show before, might sustain them for seasons to come, whilst Chiefs are going to have to essentially play catch up if they have to get out of that, situation with not having players coming in because of the ban.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The ban effectively, it ruins any sort of plans that they had for the 2020-21 season. And I don't know if we've all seen FIFA's ruling on the ban, but I think now that they've got a hearing with the Court of Arbitration for Sport, their argument probably hinges on them being allowed to bring in a handwriting expert to prove that Dax's signature was forged. If CAS does not allow them to do that, and they obviously they are not allowed to prove that the player's signature was forged, then I don't see how that ruling is overturned, because obviously FIFA did not allow Chiefs to bring a handwriting expert to show that the documents were falsified. But if they get that breakthrough, then chances are they could win that case. But having said that's not seemingly it's not stopped Chiefs from inquiring about the Vets players. They've been inquiring. They've been, sending proposals for potential deals. So they're hedging their bets. I'd like to put it that way.
Yeah.
They're hedging their bets, believing that they could have the case obviously overturned. And I think obviously Velile made this point a few weeks ago that Chiefs obviously are allowed to sort of sign players, but they cannot register them. But it's difficult now. Are the players really going to take that chance to sign a contract with a team that cannot register them for an entire season?
Because if they don't take those deals, who's going to sign them in any case? Because they will know that in 12 months' time, they will be Chiefs players.
Yes.
And also, when you're on loan, you can still be subsidized by your parent club.
Yes. So, Mr. Mark, is it now or never for Chiefs, winning the league? Because if the ban stays in place, your opponents are getting stronger. They'll have a season over you where they bed in players whilst you have to, build again, I guess, essentially when you come out of that ban.
Yeah, I think definitely in terms of next season, Chiefs are going to have a problem in terms of winning the league, in terms of having a big enough squad, even if they can't sign anyone to compete in the league and the Champions League, which I'm assuming they'll qualify for by finishing either first or second in the ABSA Premiership. I think this is their real chance. Obviously with that lead over Sundowns that they've got, provided they can hit the ground running and get almost off to the start that they got off to in the regular season, then I think they've got every chance. It really is almost starting from scratch. So even though Sundowns seem to have perhaps some momentum going into the break for COVID-19, for the lockdown, but it really does start from the beginning again. And I think that's Chiefs really, this is their chance, certainly in terms of the next 2 seasons. I do think Chiefs are a big club. They're the best supported club in the country. They're the biggest club in the country in those terms. And they will be back either way and fighting for the title in the future. But certainly in terms of next season, they're going to struggle if Sundowns and Pirates are allowed to sweep up the talent that's going in the market at the moment, certainly.
Yeah, Mazet, I mean, looking like tough times. And they really laid it out quite well that, if they don't get that one critical, I guess, cog in the wheel to help them stay, wide of being sanctioned by CAS and FIFA, it's curtains, and they then have to make this last part of the season count.
No, absolutely. But I was also going to say that if you study the FIFA ruling and you look at what potentially could be Kaizer Chiefs' heads of argument going into that CAS hearing, I have a feeling they have a strong chance of winning this case. If you look at the merits of both arguments from Forza Junior, the club in which they were involved with for the transaction of Ducks, and the whole, as I said earlier, the whole hand signature expert thing. Yeah. But at the same time, they're unlikely to get sort of a verdict on the same day. I mean, we look at the cases that have been in front of CAS the last couple of weeks. One of them, the biggest of them at the moment, being the Manchester City case in terms of European Champions League. Yeah. They've been told that they have to wait a month before there's a verdict. We look at the Caster Semenya case as well, known globally. It took forever, for there to be some sort of way forward. So, it's not like Chiefs are gonna get there and argue, make their points on the 9th of September or 8th of September, and on the 10th of September they are told, okay, ban overturned. I mean, there is that outside chance that could happen. But if you follow the process of the previous CAS cases, it can take a couple of days, a couple of weeks, and maybe even months, and that robs Kaizer Chiefs of another month. Now we're now in October now, and if the season still hasn't started, then maybe it gives them an opportunity to say they can still, find a loophole. But if it has started, I suppose it definitely. So I would agree. Definitely, if they can't register players, it puts them on the back foot in as far as their counterparts for the upcoming season. Of course, once the ban is over, they can decide whether they want to spend big and be able to catch up. But they'll have to spend big money, and they'll have to convince big talent to switch to Naturena.
Yep. And I mean, yeah, when you say it like that, Stavich, that convincing job is all going to be dependent on how well those other two teams are doing in trying to get players on board. I mean, it's quite a lot into the future, but I'm sure it's keeping up some of the higher ups at Chiefs up at night, just thinking that, listen, if we lose a season for any reason, might play catch up for a while.
Look, I think for me, that's why Kaizer Chiefs is going to try by all means and make sure that they win this ABSA Premiership title, this last ABSA Premiership title in the next month or two, because this could be maybe the only success they will have for some time now. Because I think for me, what's going to make things a bit difficult for them is also the fact that they will be playing in the Champions League as well. But also depending on how things would be going forward, we will also find out tomorrow, because tomorrow CAF president is having a press conference that is Ahmad, and that's when we'll also find out about how they are going to manage the new season of the CAF Champions League, or in fact all the CAF interclub competitions are going forward. I've heard that they could be starting in November and go until May. Like, I remember when they had that transitional season they had when they were changing the calendar of their cup competitions. So a shortened CAF Champions League could be better for Chiefs. It could offer something. But also at the same time, Chiefs will not be having a situation of trying to build a new squad. They'll be continuing with the team they had. So for me, this thing could be twofold. Even though there will be limitations, but also now it will be calling for the club to also make use of the talent that they have from their reserve team, their empty squad. Something maybe this season, Coach Ernst Middendorp has not done that much compared to how he did last season in terms of giving these youngsters a chance. Because he was focused on going for the league title, So, but also now this one is going to test whether has Chiefs been promoting these players from their development to the senior team because they are talented enough and they are good enough to be there, or they're just promoting them for the sake of promoting them. So this is going to be the true test now, because I mean, these Chelsea fans I'm with here, they will tell you that when they were faced with a similar ban, it was the time for them to first bring in friends like yes, even with the type of a coach, they brought in Frank Lampard, and also they brought all their players who were on loan. You understand? They brought those players back. And this is something which they could be doing now. And because Chiefs also, unlike like Sundowns and Pirates, they don't have a number of these players out on loan. Those few were at Swallows. I don't know any other ones other than that, that they could be recalling back to the club. So, which then means that also the profile of the coach now that they need to have this season also becomes very important. Do they continue with the current coach that they have, whom seemingly they've made a decision already that they want to release? Or if they are to bring in a new coach, are you going to bring a coach who's not familiar with South African football conditions? Who also doesn't understand the players Chiefs has currently? So, and also someone who's also who understands the CAF Champions League or CAF Confed environment as well. So I think those are the decisions the management is grappling with now. So it becomes important for them to say, in terms of numbers, let's keep those that we can keep. But the fact that they couldn't announce anything about George Maluleka today, They didn't announce anything about Joseph Mulongwane today. It tells you that there are some decisions which they've made already.
Okay. And then we'll end it with this. Neil Tovey, his contract obviously not renewed by SAFA. It's report card time, gents. If you have to give him a grade on his tenure and what he's done in the time in his tenure, what would it be? Okay, so Jonty, grade him, tell us why, and we'll keep it moving. You're up.
I don't know, Kamza, why I would grade Neil Tovey as director of football. What's he responsible for? Honestly, I don't know enough about what his role entailed.
What he was doing, yeah.
I don't know enough about it to give him a grade. I mean, I know.
Let's talk about that. I mean, was his role ceremonial? Yeah. Did he have? Was he a dog without teeth? Was he hamstrung?
As we've discussed here before, you're always a dog without teeth unless you're the president, who's making all the decisions, and unless you sort of do what the president wants you to do. So I'm sure he did that. If he stayed long in the position, he didn't go against Danny Jordan's wishes. I think they. I honestly, I really want to be honest here and say I don't know enough about what Neil Tovey did at Salford to give him a grade.
Okay.
I'm honest with you.
Okay.
If I don't know what to discredit him for, and I don't know what to credit him for. Because he wasn't front and center at Safa, certainly in his role, saying this is what I'm doing. I mean, I know there was a development role, but how much of his input, how much was he able to do in terms of development, and how much was he stunted by the various sort of rigmarole or procedures he had to go through at Safa? So I don't want to give him a grade because I don't know. I feel like I'd be guessing, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he was an excellent player. He was a good coach. As director of football at Safa, I don't know what to grade him. I can grade him for his play and maybe his coaching at Sundowns and the like, but for his role as director of football at Safa, I don't want to give him a grade. I don't know if the other gentlemen have more insight.
Mazola, Stavage, I mean, he brought us the RTOs, the regional training officers. There's some things that happened under his time that we can sort of give him credit for, no?
I think we have to correct that. The appointment of the technical officers was something that was much talked about long before he came in.
Right.
Maybe we can say
did it happen during his time?
Yes, he implemented the decision. But if you are to ask me to look back and compare from the time when we had Sirame Ritswaka and the time that we had him, I think we've regressed. You see, this is a very important position at SAF. In fact, I can even put my hair on the block and say, for me, this is the most important position.
Sure.
At SAFA.
Sure.
Since also SAFA deals a lot with amateur football. Because when you're a technical director, there are funds which cannot leave FIFA coming to the FA without your signature. As the technical director, you shape the technical vision of the FA. That's why when the national team is not performing well in other countries, it's not just the coach or even the president or his executive.
Right.
One of the first person to leave is the
technical director. Yeah.
The technical director. But I think for me, this appointment, it was questionable from the start. Because before the appointment was made, in fact, here in front of me now, I'm sitting with something. I don't think you'll be able to read it.
Oh God. Yeah. Screen's just white.
A big glare.
Yeah. It's the role description of a SAFA technical director. And the formal qualification requirement is a master's degree or an HF equivalent, an advanced football coaching license to be there. A 5 years experience in a senior manager position. A 5 years experience as a national team coach or a professional a coach of a PSL team.
Right.
Extensive work of experience as a coach educator. And at the time when he was appointed, he didn't meet some of these requirements.
Yes.
So how did he get it?
Right.
So yeah, so which becomes a question seriously for me. But looking at the 5 years, I know that part of the reasons Safa, okay, his contract came to an end, a 5-year deal. But also Safa has been saying because of his health conditions.
Yeah.
Yes. Talking about also the heart attacks his head as well. And maybe it was not ideal to continue with him. But he talks about the issues of funding. And I think for me, this is a very important point because technical officers, I can tell you right now, there's a crazy story I'm working on currently. And, we're talking about issues of honorarium at the top.
Yes.
There are some serious questions at LFA level and regional level where people are paying themselves honorariums, So having these technical officers, at least the technical officers were people who were bringing this technical vision local level, because SAFA is not just the national office. SAFA is those 341 LFAs and those 52 regions. Those are the people who are driving
development,
the football vision on daily basis. It's a pity that some of them have just had grants which are due to them written off, amounting to 50 million rands. But people are going to pay themselves an amount of 240,000 or even 170,000. And when you look at it, that translates to the annual grant these regions are supposed to be getting. So I don't think there is something I can look at and say, you know what, he did well here. The past, it's been a wasted 5 years, in my opinion, under his leadership.
Mazola, those are some strong sentiments from Stavage. I mean, did we maybe get lost in the romance of finally, kind of seeing a hero like Neil as far as relevance to his to local soccer is concerned, and a footballer kind of coming in and a football person for football problems, some would say. But now we sit all these years later, and it's very hard to put a finger on his legacy.
Look, I really think, Velile obviously is talking about the criteria, which, to a large extent, Neil didn't quite hit the nail on the head with the criteria. But I also think this project was also kind of led by, or let me say, not necessarily the project of a TD, because that's always, I've always often had a TD. You remember with the days of Siramele Tswaka and that. Let me say, the man who was appointed for this position, I think that was Dennis Mumble's baby, I think Dennis Mumble is the one that sort of led the way. I remember when Tovi was initially announced, I think a few years ago, I was still at the Sunday Times, and I spoke to Dennis Mumble about that, and even had a Q&A with Neil Tovi about his role as SAFA TD. And I must tell you, 4 or 5 years ago, Neil had amazing plans about how he was going to turn around the association.
Right.
And I'm sad to report that I've not seen any of those, if at all. I mean, I don't want to be harsh on the man, but I think he almost rendered that position almost redundant to some degree, whereas his predecessors, you can kind of see what they did during their tenure as technical directors. I mean, if you say Siramele Tswaka's name, you don't immediately think former Free State Stars captain or whatever. You think former SAFA TD, the man who also took that under 20 team to new heights as well. Whereas Tovi, to a large extent, there is no legacy, unfortunately. And I think also, I think he must have come at quite a heavy price. I mean, he's a former Bafana captain, Kaizer Chiefs player, former coach of AmaZulu, Black Aces and whatever there was that pedigree, which I don't think he would have come cheap. And with SAFA retrenching and restructuring, it was probably the decision to not have his contract renewed. But I'm afraid there has been no legacy to highlight. I mean, if you bring Neil over on this podcast, he would probably argue different, and you'd argue to the contrary, and which is fair enough. Of course, he has to defend the how he was whiling away his time for 5 years at SAFA, but a lot of people would struggle to sort of give you the top 5 Neil Tovey moments as SAFA TD.
Yeah,
perhaps it's also because of his character as a person. He's not one to hog the spotlight. I mean, I don't want to say. That's why I don't really want to give him a grade, because if he was brought in mandated to sort of help with women's football, then you can say the women Banyana qualified for a World Cup for the first time, and if he was brought in to help youth development, our under-23s are playing in the the Tokyo Olympics,
right?
If and when they happen next year. So there have been certainly positive things that have happened within SAFA structures.
But have they happened because of him or in spite of him?
But it's hard to know if they've happened because of Neil Tovey. It's impossible. I can't say. So that's why I don't want to say one way or the other. I mean, I can comment in terms of refereeing. The way SAFA responded to refereeing, I found a little bit inconsistent. And I even sort of met Tovey once, I think, in the middle of one of the incidents where they'd hammered some of their refs after some shocking decisions had occurred in the PSL, and they'd handed out some sentences. And my point was that they do this, but then they don't do anything for several months, and then again they do the same thing. But there's no consistency in, and that's what I found specifically with their handling of referees. I found that there's not a lot of consistency, and certainly in observing PSL matches. Which is where I observed most of the refereeing, I haven't seen a huge improvement in 20 years, frankly, since I started writing about football. I haven't seen a huge improvement, so I don't see that improvement. But it's hard to grade Tovey because I don't know what he was directly involved in or what he wasn't, and that might partly be due to his personality as someone who wasn't. SAFA didn't put him forward at press conferences to talk. He would sort of sit with the media almost when these press conferences were happening. So he had that sort of personality where perhaps he didn't want to be front and center of attention. So in that sense, it could have counted against him because nobody can quite see what he did in the sense of someone who perhaps was
neither did Seramele Tswaka, Seramele was always a bit behind the scenes guy, but you knew that he was the SAFA technical director, and you knew what his role was. His work spoke for the men, whereas with Neil, and really I don't really want to be harsh. Neil's a nice guy and all of that. He's always given me the time of day, but it's difficult for me to sort of come on here and say, well, this is what he's done. And as I said, when I spoke to him 4 or 5 years ago, he had great plans about what he wanted to do as SAFA TD, but I think maybe also the challenges the association has had financially and otherwise as well. Maybe that might have held him back as well in some ways.
Yeah, because also you see, in looking back on Neil, Neil reflects what SAFA is on the technical side, and unfortunately, the past 5 years we're talking about, he was leading that process. And it has always been my belief that if there's one area which was seriously lacking, not just at SAFA level, but even at club level, and how many clubs, for instance, have got sporting directors, which is what we're talking about here as technical director,
Not many.
Exactly. And if you look at, we've always been talking about this pyramid and this vision that SAFA wanted to have, the role that those technical officers will have, having the provincial teams, but the standard of producing football talent, and this is where for me we can judge someone who's a technical director. The standard of producing talent has deteriorated. that standard has
That's
deteriorated. Yeah.
Kamza, you're an idiot.
Oh, what do you mean? Tell him you'll speak to him after. You knew people were talking about it.
Yeah.
Twitch.
So, but you see, I've spoken to a number of people, technical people, who had been working with Neil during this period.
Yeah.
Inside and outside SAFA, and most of them were saying he was struggling in this area, because sometimes I think we make decisions in the country because you're an ex-player, and let's be honest. Even in terms of coaching, I remember when Steve Khombela was first recommended for this job and it was offered to him.
Yeah.
One of the things he said is that no, he still wants to coach because he felt that this is a position which would go to people who had been coaching for a very long time. But look, someone like Srameli Tswaka took it, and now he's an expert on coaching projects on the continent. Before the Zambian FA, he was part of the panel which interviewed candidates for the current job of the Zambian national team, which went to Mitchell. He also oversaw the process of Coach Ambroche, who's now coaching Botswana as well. And he's been appointed by FIFA to work around these technical football matters in South Africa and also East Africa. He's a regular technical study group member at the AFCON. We were with him in Egypt last year, and also he's also always part of the FIFA TSG technical study group for the under-20 FIFA under-20 World Cup as well. Right. And these are the credentials he's built through being what? A SAFA. So this is what we're talking about. Right. And just to go back to Neil, Jonty mentioned a very important point here. And I think sometimes this is a point which is always also made by the SAFA leadership when people question them on what they've done, and they will list all these things. And the reality, as Jonty is saying, is that this happened during Neil's reign, going to the under-20 World Cup, going to the under-17 World Cup.
Yeah.
But, when you talk to some of the coaches, they will tell you that it is not by design that the country qualified to those tournaments. It's an accidental approach, It is and I've seen coaches complaining that they are not receiving technical support from the FA. And who was the TD during that time? Some coaches would struggle to even have camps. There are just a lot of things. So I feel that as much as, yes, we've qualified to these competitions, but it is not a design which was there by the FA.
We can't replicate it, you don't think? We can't go back and say we're going to do it again because this and this and this and this is what we did.
One of those coaches, after having done so well during this period, is not there now. He's coaching the national team of Lesotho. If this was by design, we would have made means to make sure that we cannot have someone who takes us to 2 under-20 World Cups and then we lose in the system just like that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So part of me saying it's been wasted years. It's because I've listened to what some of these coaches have said in the past.
Right.
And I felt that when coaches tell you that it is not by design that we've qualified to the tournaments, it's accidental.
Yeah.
It's also maybe having had good players, but if we had really planned well and had proper preparation, we wouldn't have failed to make it beyond the group stages.
Hectic. So whoever has to come in has to have some sort of design that they then put on the association. Because you're right. I think if you asked most South African fans, football fans, if they feel like where we went or where we've gotten to is something that we can replicate and do over and over, some would be like, I'm not sure. And maybe that's the sentiment that Neil's reign brings about. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. You've been much gracious with it. Big week. We'll see what happens come Tuesday. By the time we speak next, I guess a lot will have transpired and we'll break it down again and digest it. But thanks again. Keep well. Be safe. Don't hang around in groups. You know, even if the soccer players invite you over. Politely decline. Thank you very much, gents. I'll speak to you on Thursday. Be well. Look after yourselves. Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.